Hi, my name is Molly Moyer, and my group had chapter 5.2, which was telling stories. My group was myself, Payton, Karson, and Soniya. So I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about the power of stories, and a little bit of a history of stories. So stories have been passed down to commemorate certain moments. We use storytelling every day. I feel like sometimes we don't notice that we're even telling stories, but it is a very common thing, and we all do it without even noticing. Stories describe experiences in a way that triggers the human brain to listen. Whenever someone starts telling you a story, you naturally kind of just engage and start listening to what they're talking about, and it sparks your interest. Stories have always been a part of human culture and they explain events, they teach lessons, and they share experiences. They can be long, short, personal, emotional, and many other things. And then parables, fables, and company stories teach lessons and inform. So this is the example of a company story that can be used to kind of inform an audience. So Bill Bowerman, a university track coach, saw a better running shoe, and he was inspired by the waffle pattern on his wife's breakfast iron. So he presented this idea to Nike in 1974, and then the Nike waffle trainer was introduced. And this is an example of how a company could use this story at a product launch to kind of explain how they got to where they are. And this one's kind of just like a funny story that makes you remember it. You can also do an emotional story, and that would make your audience remember it as well. Benefits of storytelling include enhancing your credibility. If you're telling stories that are kind of reinforcing your points, which is another benefit, is going to inspire your audience. They're going to listen to everything that you're saying, and they're going to believe you a little bit more if you have stories to back up what you're talking about. It reduces your speaking anxiety. If you have something to talk about and you know that you can tell a story as your backup plan, you won't be as anxious to talk in the first place. Clarifies your key points of what you're talking about so people can really take away what they need to from your speech. And it reinforces the purpose. So this reminds audience why they're there, why they're listening to you. And yeah, now Karson will take over with finding stories.
Finding stories. Stories can be found everywhere, from kids' books to holy scriptures. A good speaker would always be on the lookout through things like newspapers or online articles that they could then save and tell later. But the best stories are your own. Everyone can tell the right story, even if you think you can't. Stories can be like how you got your name, like where it came from or where you were born. Stories from your past, like past events that happened that shaped the way you are. Your family roots, like a special story about your mom or your dad. Your successes or your failures, or even things that you value the most that have brought to who you are today. Before you give your speech, analyze your audience. This will then help you be able to find stories to relate to their interests, beliefs, and values. Also, know the occasion, like what's happening in the news or in the neighborhood, or what holiday it is around the day that you speak about. Like if it's Mother's Day, you could talk about your mom. The key thing is finding something you've done, witnessed, known, or believed that is relevant to the speaking occasion. Then also, if you know someone that is relevant to your speech or audience, you can do an interview with them whose story might illuminate the subject or your presentation. But you also got to remember if you tell other people's stories, you can't use them to embarrass them or give out the private information. And also be sure that you get permission before you tell them. Now that I covered finding stories, Peyton will take over and talk about strategies and shaping.
Now that we've talked about the power stories and where to find them, we're now going to talk about the strategies to making a story to present. We usually tell stories every day, but when telling in a presentation, they must be well thought out and delivered. Stories should be short and summarized because long stories are usually harder to follow and will lose people's interest. Make sure you're not monotone. This will also make it boring instead use different rates, volumes, and pitches of the story or in the story. The best stories to share are personal stories about you overcoming a challenge or you in a certain situation. This is more interesting than talking about a historical figure. The more you practice the story and the rhythm of it, the better it will be when you're presenting it. Good stories, no matter how different, they usually have the same elements. The beginning always introduces a situation that someone has to overcome. The middle explains characteristics, and the characters like what they did to solve it or what they didn't do. And then the end usually shows it teaches the lesson and shows the resolution. All good stories include the title, which helps you focus on the purpose and brings people in, a background, what happened before the story and why we're telling the story, character development, describing the people in the story and their backgrounds, the conflict, what the challenge is, what's happening, the climax, where is the turning point or discovery of the story, the resolution, how the problem was resolved. You don't want to leave the audience on a cliffhanger. Always tell them what was done to fix the problem, and then the central point, which is you tying back into the title, which what the purpose was, and does it reflect the message.
My name is Soniya, and this is my portion of the group project. My part is why storytelling works, and our chapter was 5.2. The best stories have two essential qualities: probability and fidelity. Good stories also follow accepted storytelling principles that sustain the meaning and value of story truths. Understanding these principles can make stories work for you in a presentation. Stories succeed when they feel real and relevant. Two essential qualities is probability and fidelity. Even fiction can reveal true insights. Truth to speaker is to be genuine and share real emotion. Truth to audience is to understand and meet expectations. Truth to purpose is to keep your story aligned with your goal. Truth to occasion is to tailor your voice, tone, and length appropriately. Story truths reflect the accepted principles that underline the meaning and values in a story. Story fidelity focuses on the story's connection to the audience and is the stories faithful to what they already know. Story probability describes the formal features of stories, such as the consistency of characters and their actions, and asks, how would this happen? It refers to whether or not a story follows its own internal logic. This ensures probability, it makes sense. Ensure fidelity, it matters to your listeners. Conveying emotion, belief, and purpose, and adapt your delivery, voice, and pacing presence. Thank you for listening.